This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. Yesterday we all watched the President's State of the Union address, and it's an annual event. The President throughout history has told the Congress what the condition of the United States is and then laid out his plan for the next year. The early ones were written, and the President would write them and have them sent up to Congress. There was no television or radio or anything, and so the members of Congress, I guess, would have it read to them by someone. Now it's become a big media event, and every 3 years the incumbent president, especially if he's in his first term, gives the most important one, because 3 years means that it's his last one, and therefore it becomes more of a campaign speech, because if the president is planning to run for re-election, that's a big audience he's getting for free, and that was certainly the case with President Obama. So you have to look at his most recent State of the Union speech as partly fulfilling his, regular responsibility of informing Congress about condition of the country, domestic and foreign policy, and some suggestions for what he would like Congress to do in the next year, but also as his first campaign speech of the 2012 presidential races. I thought he did a pretty good job. I've talked about it since he gave it with some of my colleagues and friends across the country, and many of them said that it was okay, it wasn't great. The applause was less than normal. Some of the members of Congress fell asleep, and he didn't get as many rousing standing ovations as presidents sometimes get. And I believe them. I haven't done a comparison, but it's possible that there was less enthusiasm. This is not a time when people are actually very enthusiastic. The economy is not in very good shape. We've got a looming foreign policy crisis that is enormous. No, I'm not talking about Iraq, which is descending back into terrorism. No, I'm not talking about Afghanistan either, where things are very dicey, and I'm not sure we're winning the war. France this last week said that if their soldiers kept getting killed who are serving there, they might pull out of Afghanistan and just go home. I'm talking about Iran, because we are building up towards a potential very big international crisis. So, and that's over Iran's threat to choke off oil coming out of the Gulf if the U.S. and the international community continue to put sanctions on them. So, the evening was not a happy evening where everything is, hunky-dory and the president is looking forward to the election and to next year. There was a somber mood, and you could feel it in the atmosphere. Jobs haven't come back in the numbers that we need. The economy is very sluggish and is slowly, very slowly recovering. The European economic crisis is still big. So President Obama kind of had to focus on some things that he would like, I think, to use to run against the Republicans. And some of those had to do with Republicans essentially not passing legislation that he has sent to them. He said that several times. More generally, I think he was scolding the Congress in general, both Democrats and Republicans, for not being able to sit down and working together to get things done. He also made a very large emphasis on kind of a long-term future policy. Won't help people this year, won't help people in the next 2 years, but in the long run, he says he wants to bring back manufacturing to the United States by providing lots of tax incentives for companies that create jobs in the U.S. instead of moving their factories overseas. I thought that was an important piece of his speech, and I think it's been underestimated. We got badly tricked into thinking that the United States could be a post-industrial economy. That's what they called it, a service economy. Yeah. An economy where we have primarily banking, insurance, and things like that. And in fact, that has turned out to be a very serious disaster for especially people with less education who used to be able to get very good jobs in factories and in manufacturing. And so that was an important part of the speech. The Republicans dismissed it largely as a campaign speech, and that's unfortunate, and that's just the way it goes. We are a very divided country. There is not much respect anymore for the president. It used to be that even if you disagreed with the president, you respected the office of the president and whoever was in there. But that, I think, has declined, at least in the years that I've been analyzing politics. And it's unfortunate, I think, because that's all you got. You got one president. You don't have a choice year 1, 2, 3, or 4. In the 5th year, you can throw them out. In the 4th year, and in the 5th year, you can let somebody else. But you're stuck at least for 4 years. You might as well try to work with the guy. And that has really not happened. There's been gridlock. There's been a lot of obstructionism and infighting, and essentially kind of the Ron Paul approach, which is to just say no to everything. Ron Paul is interesting because he has basically voted against everything that the Congress has tried to implement in almost all the years that he served there. He doesn't believe that the federal government should be doing almost anything. Now the whole Congress seems to want to impose their views on everybody else, and so that was reflected in that State of the Union speech very heavily. The best moment of the night, or at least what I would call the most touching moment, the one that is going to go down in the history books, is when after the speech he went down on the floor and Arizona Congresswoman Gabriela Giffords, who you remember was shot in the head during a shooting spree, he walked over to her and hugged her, and they hugged each other and smiled at each other, and it was a very nice, touching moment. She's resigning from Congress because even though she's recovered remarkably, she still is in relatively delicate condition, so she's going to be leaving the Congress, and that was kind of a nice touch at the end. I think it's too bad that he didn't mention, maybe he didn't have all the information yet, because the night of the State of the Union address, the United States went into Somalia and rescued 2 hostages who had been held by the pirates there. American Special Forces went in and brought them out successfully. And if he had mentioned that as a sort of late-breaking news, it would have electrified the Congress, and it would have been another indication, you know, that the United States is robust and is not going to put up with international piracy and disorder. He did thank the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Panetta, by saying, good job, and nobody knew what he was talking about until after the State of the Union speech, when the news broke that those 2 hostages had in fact been freed. So it was an interesting ceremonial night. My students, I'm sure, learned a lot about the pomp and circumstance of a State of the Union. I hope they all watched it. And now we move on, because now we go into full campaign mode. This is the beginning of the 2012 race for the White House and for Congress. And it is going to be an exciting year. And you can tell from the speech, if you watch it again, you can watch it on the internet. It lays out all the different themes, I think, of what the campaign is going to be about, all the different issues that are going to be raised, on the one hand, by the Republicans in opposition to Obama and the Democrats, and Obama and the Democrats pushing back and trying to explain why they favor national health care and health care reform and things like that, which are going to be the central issues: jobs, health care, job creation. He didn't mention the deficit and the national debt, which I thought was very interesting. The Republicans bring that up every single time they talk about Obama. I think that the president did not want to talk about cutting anything because the economy is still in pretty frail shape, and he wanted to talk about where he's going to spend money and invest and restructure to try and jumpstart the economy and get it rolling. So all in all, another interesting political evening. And we will follow up on all those issues that he brought up over the next months as the campaign rolls down the road. Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com.